Hey, and welcome to iHeart Intellectual Radio, Black Conservative Radio. I am your host, Alan J. Campbell, aka the Batman, here at the top of the hour in Gotham. All right, let me, I want to thank my man at the show. I want to thank my man Charles Thomas and Mark Wallace for keeping the seat warm for me, keeping it warm for me until the Batman gets here. Hey, like I said before, before my show, catch their show, The People Show with Charles Thomas and Mark Wallace. It is very, very good. It's insightful and informative. Once again, The People Show every Monday night at from 7 to 9 each Monday night just before my show. Now, let me I'm gonna get into a couple of things right quick. It was mentioned to me, so I'm going to indulge my man here. I want to touch on briefly, because I don't have all the information, and you all know me, that if I'm going to get into something, I'm going to have as much information as I possibly can. I don't do anything half-ass or so on and so forth. So we were discussing these stolen documents that Trump had in his possession at his compound at what he called the Mar-a-Lago. Okay, so here's the thing about that. From what I'm understanding, okay, yes, he was in possession of what they say, and let the United States government tell it, secret documents. Remember now, these are the same sumbitches who had Kennedy killed. These same sumbitches who have created so much, who have so much dirt on them. These are the same people. This is the same government who in 1941 through 1946 were conducting experimental tests on black men with conducting tests with syphilis on black men to see the effects that it has, quote unquote, on black men. So, if he had these documents, what, more power to him. But here's the problem. Okay, everybody's saying these documents, blah, 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 and he had in his possession. See, they're treading. If you notice that this thing is not really picking up a lot of steam. Why? Because he was in possession of documents that, understandably, that he had access to. Number one, that he had access to. Number one, also that this is telling certain things that the United States government don't want to get out. See, here's the thing. Donald Trump is that guy who knows where all the bodies are. So they have to tread very lightly, because it could be somebody's name listed in those documents that they realize that he had his hand up some little boy's pants. So we need to people, they're treading lightly. There's a saying in Washington. You don't want to get caught with a dead girl or a live boy. And understand this. Those documents could have a bunch of live boys in it or some dead girls. And not in the literal sense, but as far as what could be politically damaging. I mean, if you don't believe me, go at, you can't ask him now, but if you don't believe me, look up Edward Kennedy. Look him up. Find out his story, because Edward Kennedy got caught with what? A dead girl. Yes, he did. Now, those documents, or as they say, now you can't say they will leak this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth. But they had a lot of information that Trump, as the time being president, was privy to. Here's the other thing. The Attorney General of the state of New York has backtracked on prosecuting him. Now, this was a broad that said when she was running for office, state of New York, as Attorney General, well, the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to prosecute Donald Trump to the fullest extent of the law. Okay, watch out, baby, because you understand something. Your name may be one of those, names listed in some of those documents, because all of a sudden now she's kind of she's backtracking on a lot of that mouth she's running. This is a typical, almost to a point. This is typical of some black women, all mouth, all just all mouth, because you feel you're in a seat of power. Understand something. Donald J. Trump is the guy who knows where all the bodies are buried. This is the guy. This is the guy who has a picture of Bill Clinton at a particular party wearing a dress. This is the guy. This is the guy who knows the intimate details of the late Jeffrey Epstein. This is the guy who knows all of the dirt on certain politicians. That guy, when some of you were when you were coming up, and you went to a party at somebody's house or whatever it was, and you always had that one little kid standing in the corner. That's the motherfucker. That's the one that you should be watching out for, because he's watching everything you do, and he's storing it in his mind, because at some point or another, that's going to become like valuable currency. That's who Donald Trump really is. He's spilling the beans. He understands something. This is a guy who does not go to sleep without a plan. Does not go to sleep. Do you see this dude? You see this guy sweating? This guy is not sweating. This guy is not batting arm. Not only that, but this dude has a battery of lawyers. And not only that, but he's got a couple of cases that he had that is slated to be heard. Get this, define irony. He has a couple of cases that are concerning this situation to be heard by the current Supreme Court. Some of the very people he put on the bench. Now, I'm going to tell you, define irony. Or as we say, that's ironic that this should come full circle. And make no mistake about this, people. This is the, as they say, poke the bear, the sleeping giant. This guy is going to shake things up for the 2024 election. He's gonna knock some people out of the box. Even certain people of his own party, they're not going to be able. They're not going to be able to. They're not going to be able to run with him. They're not going to be able to stand up against him. This is a dude. Make no mistake. This is a guy that's coming back. Make no mistake about it. And if it'd be a trick to it, but this is a guy that is, as they say, getting all his ducks in a row and putting people in place. Why do you think this guy is not sweating bullets over those documents, those secret documents that he had in his possession? Because because it is all part of his plan, whatever that plan may be. Remember, Donald Trump is the guy who knows where the bodies are buried. Now, I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk about this other incident. And I want you all to think for a minute, because it wasn't surprising. I mean, make no mistake about it. I've been black since I got here. Okay. So I was at a restaurant I was at a restaurant Saturday, sitting down, eating something, blah, blah, blah. Now, so as I'm sitting there, sitting there, and as we're sitting there eating, okay, we're sitting there eating. I see this little Mexican kid, a little Mexican kid out the corner of my eye, and he just kept staring, just like he's never seen a black person before, a black man or a black, never seen a black person before. And he couldn't have been no more than, I guess, maybe 6 or 7 years old. And he just kept staring. And I'm like, what the fuck is this kid? Why does he keep looking? What, So so all of a sudden, I hear now let me set the atmosphere. It's a family of Mexicans sitting at the table. A family of Mexicans. There's I think there's two men, two women. No, it's two men and three women. Then there are three children. Okay, four children. I'd say four children. So they're all sitting there talking, and they're talking in their language, whatever that may be, Mexican, Hispanic, whatever it is. They're all talking blah blah blah. So I hear out the corner. I hear this. It was so faintly, and the little boy. I kid you not. I can't make this up. The little boy says, and Earl, this tripped me out when he said this. He says, "Wow, he is really brown. I've never seen a brown person before." I had to actually I had to stop eating and really think that, okay, did I just hear that? Now he's 5 years. He couldn't have been no more than 6 or 7 years old. And the little girl that was sitting with them, now she's about 5 years old, and she says, "Well, yes, there are." She went on to say, she says, "Yes, there are brown people, and yes, he really is brown, and he's a brown person." I just like, am I hearing this? And then so the little girl gets up, goes to the mother, and asks, "Why is he brown?" I'm blown. So the little girl comes back and sits down with the two other little boys and says, "Well, mommy says that that's just how they are." Quote unquote, that's just how they are. This is the part to where you almost don't know what to say, but the fact that this came out of a child's mouth, and the fact that they have somewhat of a premise of color, but they have no understanding on what they're saying is a racist. Now the funny part, a racist statement. How can a Mexican be racist? How in the world can they be racist? So so I'm sitting. I said, uh, did I hear that correctly? Did I hear what? And they said, yeah, you heard that, because I heard it. So I'm like, I'm really, really trying to process this. This is coming out of children's mouth, but I say that, and I bring that because this is a prime example of racism being taught. Now, the only way that this child could have distinguished the color of me and him is that he's heard the adults talk about black people like a dog with 10 tails. 9 times out of 10, they've been calling us niggers. 9 times that this is nigger this, nigger that, and I guarantee that's what the conversation is in the house. Don't do business with blacks. Don't do business with blacks. Don't do business with niggas. Don't do this. Don't do that. These are some of the bad people. These are some of the people who are committing crimes. These are guaranteed, because that's the only way that child would have understood who I was and what my color represented. This is coming out of a 7-year-old child's mouth saying he is really brown. And the 5-year-old says, yes, he really is brown. They're just that way. How would a 5-year-old have any kind of comprehension or understanding unless it's taught? Remember, people, we have to understand racism is not bred, or it's not bred. You're not born with it, and it's not. And racism is taught. It is taught. That is the only way that this child could have come up with the concept of saying what they said. And the fact of the matter is that the parents were sitting there, and then one of the adults kept looking at me as if, once again, he'd never seen a black person before. And the thing that's really disturbing is that it's difficult. I won't say difficult, but you for black people, it's difficult for us to be racist because we don't because you can't be racist if you're not an oppressor. The only way that you can be a racist if you I mean that you can be racist if you are oppressing another group of people. And Mexicans or Hispanics should be the last people talking about racism or being oppressed people. Let's be clear. I was born here in this country, born here, but yet and still, I'm still considered a second class citizen. And according to the Constitution, I'm not even considered a human being. I am considered chattel property. 3/5 of a man. How in the hell can you 3/5 of a man? So I guess you know what let's really dive into that. 3/5 of something. So I mean, not even a whole human being. We're called subhuman creatures, things of this nature. But to hear this goes back and see this like this is where these children, this is bred into them. This is taught. This is the only way. So you can imagine the conversation in the home or what the children are seeing or observing and absorbing in their psyche. Because obviously these are children that don't go to school with black kids, obviously. Or no, I won't say obviously, that's the wrong word. Apparently, they don't go to school with black children. Obviously, they don't. But we still, but even at this point, and it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible, and it's a shame, and it's a travesty that we are still in this society, or we're still in this predicament, even in the year 2022, that we are still having this conversation about race and racism. Race and racism. We're still having the conversation. It's not so. I mean, and it's not so surprising. It really isn't. It's not. There's a and you as a black man in America, you have no choice but to deal with it. You have no choice but to, and I won't say accept it, but you have no choice but to deal with it. You have no choice. And as you go through society and looking at and having to deal with this, the ideology, the thing is that you ask yourself, when does it end? Well, here's the thing. Let me give people a news flash. It doesn't, and it's not going to. It isn't until there is a certain level of respect and understanding, and it has to be, and not only that, but it has to be across the board to where people recognize other people, and also too, some of that has to start with the way that the Constitution was written concerning blacks in America. See, let's start there, because see, if you start making amendments to the Constitution concerning blacks, I mean, we could say the 14th and 15th Amendment says, okay, we're allowed to vote, and then we can't be discriminated. But see, we have to go back a little bit further to the Sixth Amendment, to where it describes us, and we're still considered property. We're still considered 3/5 of a man, which I just and even to a degree, that's even mind-boggling to the psyche of the mofo that actually wrote that in the Constitution. Well, that we're going to consider them 3/5. I'm not getting that. Okay, you know 3/5. Okay, you got you know, when you're doing math and you're quartering up something, you have a quarter, a half, three quarters, and then a whole. How do you come to the part of 3/5? So I guess I guess say, okay, if you get a black man and he's got one arm and one arm, five fingers, and only six toes, maybe half of he's got a Kunta Kinte foot, half an ear. So I guess those are parts that we consider. So how do you come up with that? How do you come up with that? That summation. Chattel property, operative word, property. See, when we talk about justice for all, equal treatment under the law, how can we say equal treatment under the law when the very law that was written did not include us? How does that work? Even on the facade of the United States Supreme Court, where it says equal, how do we get to that part of equality when we're still considered we're not considered citizens, or we're considered second class citizens? How does that supposed to work? How does that happen? Just to let you all know that the phone lines are open if you have a comment about this part of the show concerning race. So give me a call here at the studio at 708-223-8953. That's 708-223-8953. We're talking about, once again, race. We cannot move forward as a society, not so much as a people, but as a society, when we're still having the conversation, or it's an open book conversation about color. How do we do it? When we sit here and we talk about certain liberties and rights for for the alphabet city, for Hispanics, for all other things, but yet we're still having this conversation concerning Black people. We're still having this conversation. When we talk about things changing, it has to start from the top and work its way down. It has to. It has to start at and one of and as they say, the longest the hardest part of a thousand mile journey is the first step. And the first step is recognizing that blacks are people. And it's ironic. And here's the other thing. And it's ironic that, okay, with today being, and I know a lot of you may have had the day off, but it's absolutely ironic that we are having that today is what they call now, because they no longer call it Columbus Day. Because why? Columbus was a racist, murdering, raping thief. Okay, let's get that out. I don't want to hear shit from the Italians are talking about he was a great guy. He was a great Italian American, this, that. No, he wasn't. This guy was a scumbag. This is who exactly was. This is a guy another knucklehead who had poor navigational skills and got lost and ended up and trying to find the faster route around to the Pacific, and got lost and ended up in the Caribbean. And not only that, but tried to and then took over the country and say, I discovered this. Let's get it straight, people. How can you say you discovered something or discovered a new land when there are people already there? Once again, white people stealing something. So it's now called Indigenous People Day, meaning, okay, and understand the word indigenous, meaning these are people who are already here. Believe it or not, for example, when the Protestants, or the Pilgrims, as they call them, left England and crossed the Atlantic, and once again, these are some more people that had poor navigational skills, got lost, and ended up or as I heard it say once, the only way that these people found their way to America is that somebody couldn't read a map, made a wrong turn, and ended up in Massachusetts, which is where they say, oh, Plymouth, where they landed in Plymouth. Plymouth is in the state of Massachusetts. These are people who came here and claimed the land. Okay. Here's the thing: when they got here, there were 320 some odd people, half of which died the first year, the first winter, because these knuckleheads, they had no idea on how to till the land, how to build a house, how to survive those harsh New England winters. Half of the 320 plus died the first year. How they managed to survive is that the Native Americans, or the Indians as we want to call them, had to teach these fools how to till the land, grow food, and survive winter. So you have to ask yourself, who's the real barbarian? Ask yourself that question. Here's another thing. Even in Africa, we knew how to manage the land when white people were living when living like Vikings, living in caves and operating like Vikings. It's ironic that we're having this conversation about race on a day where race is a topic. We're considering they changed it to Indigenous People Day. Basically, they're referencing the Native Americans who had this land long before any of us got here, long before any of us were stolen from our homeland and brought here, long before these so-called explorers got here and say we're gonna look for this one. These two dudes named Lewis and Clark, and I'm sure some of you have heard. These are two guys who, once again, they had to hire guides to take them up the river, so they could to take them up the river to find different portions of the country, because they had they didn't know where they were. So how in the world can you say you discover something if you have to hire or pay someone to show you how to get through this? We have to start using a little bit more of common sense on what we consider. And going back to this part of the children, um of the children saying what they're saying, and you don't blame the children. You blame the you blame the parenting, or you blame the parents, because these are children who obviously have no idea or understanding on what they're saying. The fact that this 6 or 7 year old child said, "Why is he brown? He's really brown." At the opposite word, why is he brown? That's the thing is, and you can only imagine. It's no different when we're talking about indigenous people day than when we're talking about the Indians or the Native Americans. They had, they had their skin tone. They were dark colored people. They were dark colored individuals. The same thing with the people who lived in the Caribbeans, who lived in Jamaica, who lived in and these all these other Southern Caribbean areas, and those who lived in the coastal lands of the first Americas, of the first America, and then slowly but surely started moving forward. And then when white people started coming here and started moving further west, they began to steal everything they put their hands on, like they do today. So race and racism, make no mistake about it, people, it's not going to go away. Not going to go away, especially when you have the thinking and the ideologies of certain people. It is not going to go away. It's not going to happen. There's a woman. She's a sportscaster. Her name is Maria Taylor. Okay. And she worked for, well, at the time, she worked for ESPN, and this was in 2020 when she worked for ESPN. Her and another woman got into, sort of speak, got into a little riff, and it boiled down to race. The comment was made. The only reason that she was named the color commentator or the sportscaster for the wait, get this, for the NBA, when it was, yeah, this was 2020, and for the NBA finals. And a comment was made by a white reporter. The only reason that Maria Taylor was given that assignment was because she was black, and and most of the players in the NBA are black. That got out. That got out. A white reporter said this about Maria Taylor. It got back to Taylor, and then it got to the executives. Taylor threatened to sue for racial discrimination I can't think of it right offhand, but she was going to sue. What ESPN tried to do, basically tried to buy her off. ESPN, because she was making $1 million. She was making $1 million salary of $1 million. ESPN told her that they would up her salary from 1 million to 5 million if she stayed, and the individual and they would force the individual who made these disparaging comments apologize. Let me tell you what Maria did. Maria told them, "No, thank you. You can keep your money." She quit the day after the NBA finals were over. She quit that day. NBC came calling and offered her a ton of money to be the lead sportscaster on what's now, or where she's at on. She's the sportscaster for Football Night in America, Sunday night, or basically what we used to call Sunday Night Football. But she's the lead sportscaster. The lead sportscaster. Now, the individual that created all this rumpus, now that the bottom of, but the point being is this: here we are. Now this one, Maria Taylor, she's a college graduate. She's got several accolades. She's an athlete for volleyball and basketball. All of these accolades, but yet still, the only reason that in the comment was the only reason that she got the slot for it for the to call the finals was because she was black, and because most of the players in the NBA are black. I don't think you can get any more racist than that. I mean, what you think, Earl? No, that's what was said. That's what was said, and they tried to buy her off, and not only that, buy her off and her silence. She went public. She went public, and I don't blame her. Not only that, but not only that, but you gonna promote the girl who said this about me, and then I'm supposed to accept that. No, what we're gonna do is that we're gonna leave her where she is, and we'll give you $5 million to stay. No, it's not. She said and this was also this what also she's supposed to be said. There's not enough money for me to stay here. This is ESPN, and that hurt ESPN for a good minute because all of this got out. All of this got out, but we're still having this conversation in 2022. Still having it. Whether it's on the job, whether it's in the sports world, whether it's in the political arena, race is going to always be a factor in everything that we do. It's going to be a factor. Point blank, period. It's going to be a factor. And the thing that where we have where we can address this or at least try to is that it has to start with us as the adults or those who have the full understanding on what this means, how damaging. It's not so much as it's hurtful, yes, but how damaging it continuously can be. The unfortunate part is that when we're not we're not talking we're putting race off to the side because it's still here, but we're putting too much energy into people's feelings. We're putting too much energy into these participation award trophy ceremonies. We're putting too much into, yeah, hey, let's give a hand, when you got two teams that are competing and one team beats the other. Hey, let's give a hand for the team that let's give a hand for our for the losing team too. They came out. Let's give a hand to them. They came out and they played their best and they did. No, if they played their best, they would have won. I come from the world to where there are winners and losers. I come from the world where there's black and there's white. There is no middle ground. If you win, you win. Look, take the game of chess. If you look at that true game, look at that game, the chess game, the game of chess. The game of chess. The pieces are black and white. It's symbolic of life. You take the game of checkers. The pieces are black and red. Black and red. But the chess pieces, but the pieces for the game of chess are black and white. Or yes, black and white. Make no mistake, the pieces there's some pieces where there's some games where the pieces can be a similar of a polished gray or a light or an eggshell white, but the other side is going to always be black. That is because that is the difference. That is a symbolic meaning. Okay, the struggle of what we're having to deal with. Black, white. This is an ongoing affair, and it's going to continue to be an ongoing affair. Ongoing affair. You take you take the Supreme Court. Okay, you have two blacks on the Supreme Court. Two. But if you look at the Supreme Court since its inception, and you go further back, and then you get to the first the first black Supreme Court justice, who was Thurgood Marshall, the first black to sit on the Supreme Court. And Thurgood Marshall was a civil rights attorney. Okay, civil rights attorney. And so then you move, and this is how it go how we have to look at it. Or we're saying to ourselves, well, how many blacks have actually been on the Supreme Court? Well, if you count what we got right now, there's two plus Thurgood Marshall. There's only been three blacks on the Supreme Court. And basically since 1960, and when Thurgood Marshall was seated, which was in the late 60s, then you move to Clarence Thomas, who was seated in the 80s, late 80s or early 90s. Then you have Ketanji Brown. This is where we're at. And they make no mistake, and it's not because there weren't enough qualified blacks. It is just because they are black. They are. Now, when we talk now, just to sidebar for a moment. Now, when we talk about the Supreme Court, and we're looking at the shift of power, and that's exactly what it is, the shift of power. Okay, so you have three liberals. Okay, so it's a 6-3 conservative court. Okay, so you have three liberals, and the three liberals happen to be the three women. You got Sotomayor, Elaine Keegan, and Kenji Brown. Three women. Okay, and so almost to a point, you got to look at it. It's kind of laughable. I mean, you got you got the rainbow. You got half of the rainbow coalition. You got a black, a white, and a Mexican. I mean, that's the liberal trifecta right there. You can't get. I mean, how who could have thought of that one? Then you move to the conservative side. You have Chief Justice Roberts, Clarence Thomas, um, uh, uh, Kavanaugh, Amy Barrett, and then you have Gorsuch. Okay, now when you look at that setup, okay, we can say, at that particular point, you don't look at race. You look at you look at the law, because at this particular point, that's all that matters. But there's only two blacks on the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, the highest. Now, that being said, now when you look at this, Clarence Thomas being the more senior justice, believe it or not, Clarence Thomas has more power than the Chief Justice because of his tenure. Clarence Thomas is the most powerful justice in the country right now. And right now, believe it, Clarence Thomas has an axe to grind of the years that certain things that he wanted to repeal and to push through. Some of those things concerning civil rights. This guy has an axe to grind. Not to mention that Clarence Thomas is married to a white woman. So whether there's a hidden agenda or not, this guy he's very powerful. This is the guy that when he gets the cases, he is the one that pretty much decides who gets the cases, what cases go to whom, and what brief and who's going to do the brief and who's going to write what they call the majority of the opinion. Now, understand something. When we're talking about the Supreme Court, when they're talking about the rulings, it's not so much as a ruling, but as they always start out, it is the opinion of this court. This is the Supreme Court translating or giving more clarification to the law. And that is what's most important. Now, when we start working back this way towards the law and people of color, and that's another thing that we have to actually really define. Here's the thing. I am a person of color. I am a person of color. When we start adding people into these things, such as when you say Mexicans or Hispanics are people of color, no, they're not. When you're saying Asian or Oriental people of color, no, they're not. No, they're not. See, the only way that you can truly be considered a person of color is that you have to be a member of the oppressed society. A member of the oppressed, not the oppressive, not the oppressor, but the oppressed. See, when they were referencing black people back in the 20s, 30s, 50s, 60s, they considered these people, hey, he's a person of color, black person of color. When we get to the part when we reference, and then when we're dealing with the Supreme Court, when you go in front of them, they're not looking at black and white. They're looking at the letter of the law, how the law was written, and how it's going to be interpreted, or how it's going to be where clarification is going to be given. Clarification. When we talk about racism and race, For example, when I mentioned some time ago about affirmative action, and when they put that in, and this is one of the things that the justices had mentioned some time ago, that affirmative action actually hurts people instead of helps. And when we're talking about affirmative action is basically a guide to say, hey, we're going to set aside a certain percentage of certain things for people of color, so they're given an equal opportunity. Okay. There was a situation here in the Chicago Fire Department, who at the time the Chicago Fire Department was one of, well, it was considered, let me say that, was considered one of the most racist entities in the city of Chicago. The Chicago Fire Department was considered the most racist entity. It was hard for blacks to get to join the fire department. It was hard for blacks who were already in the fire department to move up the ranks. It was hard to do that. It really was hard. It got to a point to where there was there was a class action lawsuit filed against the Chicago Fire Department for discrimination and inappropriate practices, meaning hiring practices. So that means that if you had 15,000 people apply for the fire when they had the open, when this was in 94, when this incident happened, they had when they had the fire exam, and you had 16,000 people apply, and out of the 16,000 people that applied, let's say for the sake of argument, out of that number, there were 7,500 of those people that were black. Now, out of the 7,500 that were black that passed, that took it, then letters went out and said that there were two form letters. One that stated qualified and another one stated highly qualified. Now, you take the ones that are highly qualified, let's say out of the 7,500, there were the two letters that went out of the 7,500, say 3,000 came back to say qualified, and highly qualified. So we're still dwindling down, but at the same time, none of those letters went anywhere. People never got called back. They never got anything that happened. So it was a group of people that filed a lawsuit against the city of Chicago, and the city of Chicago had to pay out millions upon millions of dollars on people who took the firefighters exam. But now, if you were part of that, they gave you an option. They gave you an option to go through. They gave you an option of either taking the cash settlement or go through the academy. But now here's the catch: the cutoff for becoming a candidate for a firefighter was 42 years old. So by the time that this thing, this class action lawsuit made its way through the courts, almost 10 years had passed. So some of those people who were probably in their 30s or who were in their 20s or 30s, they would be beyond the age. They would have aged out, so to speak. So they couldn't become that, but then some took the money and some managed to get through. But this is a prime example of race and racism through certain entities. Even the Chicago Police Department, same thing. And not only these two municipalities, but this is all over the country. There's a police department, and there's a town in North Carolina, believe it or not. North Carolina, the entire police department, get this, Earl, the entire police department, all 27 officers resigned because the city hired a black manager to oversee the police department and fire department hired not only black, but a black woman to oversee this. Her job was to come in and look at situations involving the police and the community. She found some. The police department, they all showed up at a city council meeting, and they walked in, dropped their badges on the council desk, and they all walked out. All 27 police officers, because they didn't want to work for this black woman. Where in the world, what kind of country do we live in that this happens? I'm saying this rhetorically, but what type of example? So I'm gonna hold that. I'm gonna pause for a minute. So when you see something like that, that right there proved, so to speak, proved her point of racism in the police department. So it appears, so even the reports or whatever, the complaints or whatever that may have been that she had to review, and these police officers quit. Because here's the thing, all 27 police officers were white. They had no black, even Hispanics on this police department. They brought in this black woman. The entire police force quit the next day. Unheard of. Unbelievable. And we scratch our head and say, wow. Wow. Because racism is not, you're not born racist. You are taught racism. You are taught that. That was a reminder to me when I'm sitting in a restaurant and I hear a little child, 5 and 7, discussing race and saying, why is he brown? Mommy says that some of them are brown like that. Now the girl comes back, and I reiterate, she comes back and tells the other 2 children, Mommy says that they are brown like that. Not they're born that way, but some of them are brown like that. Wow. What do you say to that? See, as a parent, it is our job, it is our duty, it is our responsibility to teach our children better. In order to be better, we have to do better. We have to teach this new generation of children how to conduct, how to act, how to have a sense of dignity, a sense of pride in ourselves. We can't worry about the white man or white America. We can't worry about the Hispanics because they got enough trouble of their own, because some up there, they're crossing the border illegally. This is hilarious to me. They're crossing the border and they're coming into Texas, and the Texas governor is putting them on buses and shipping them to these sanctuary cities. New York, the city of New York had to declare a state of emergency because they were overrun with immigrants, that they had no housing, no food, no money, nothing. They had nowhere to put these people, and they were overrun with them. But you want to be a sanctuary city when you have people who look like me, who are going to these facilities and needing these resources to just maintain. Define irony. I could say all day, every day, that we have to do a better job, that we have to do this, we have to do that. But I repeat and I reiterate, in order to be better, we have to do better. And that starts with us as adults, as the parents, of teaching our young generation and our third generation on how not to be these kind of people. But with that being said, I see the lights flashing in the distance and the helicopter's about to land. So what does that mean? That means that's all the time we got here on tonight's show, Black Conservative Podcast, here on iHeart Intellectual Radio. I want to give a shout out to my man, Captain Hook. Hey, get over there and get you some food at 85th and Cottage Grove, 103rd and King Drive, and 15922 South Kedzie in Markham, Illinois. Hey, with that being said, not my monkey, not my circus.
These niggas think it ain't crazy out here.